The year was 2147, and Earth had changed in ways that people from the past could never have imagined. Wars were a distant memory. Nations worked together instead of fighting each other. Cities reached toward the sky with buildings made of glass and metal that seemed to glow with their own light. Humanity had finally learned to live in peace, and now they looked up at the stars with hope and wonder. Admiral Daniel Brooks had served in the Earth Defense Force for 30 years. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much. On this particular morning, he stood on the observation deck of Gateway Prime, the largest space station orbiting Earth. He held a cup of coffee and watched the blue planet below, thinking about how far his species had come. Then the alarms started screaming. Daniel dropped his coffee and ran to the command center. Officers were shouting and pointing at screens filled with red warning lights. Lieutenant Amy Reeves, a young woman with short brown hair and sharp eyes, was the first to give him a clear report. "Sir, long-range sensors have detected incoming vessels," she said. Her voice was steady, but Daniel could see fear in her eyes. "Thousands of them. They just appeared at the edge of the solar system." Daniel stared at the screen. The objects were moving fast, much faster than anything humans had ever built. Each vessel was enormous, some of them larger than entire cities. They moved in perfect formation like a swarm of metal insects coming to devour everything in their path. "How long until they reach Earth?" Daniel asked. "At their current speed." "Approximately 48 hours, Amy replied. Within minutes, every government on Earth received the same terrifying data. Emergency meetings were called. Military forces went on high alert. Scientists scrambled to analyze the unknown ships. The entire planet held its breath and waited. The answer came 6 hours later in the form of a transmission. The message played on every screen on Earth simultaneously. The creature that appeared was unlike anything humans had ever seen. It had gray skin stretched over a skull-like face. 4 arms extended from its thin body. Its eyes were completely black and showed no emotion at all. "We are the Zorathi Dominion," the creature said, in a voice that seemed to echo inside the minds of everyone who heard it. "Your planet has been selected for acquisition. You will surrender all resources and population for processing. Resistance will result in immediate extinction. You have 24 hours to comply." The transmission ended. For a moment, the entire world was silent. Then the panic began. Dr. Laura Mitchell was the chief scientist at the Global Defense Initiative. She was a woman in her 50s with wild gray hair and glasses that she constantly pushed up her nose. When Daniel arrived at her laboratory, she was surrounded by screens showing data about the alien fleet. "Tell me you have good news," Daniel said. Laura shook her head slowly. Her face was pale. "I have run every simulation possible. Their shields are unlike anything we have ever encountered. Our weapons cannot penetrate them. Their smallest ships could destroy our entire fleet without taking any damage." "There has to be something we can do," Daniel insisted. Laura turned to face him. There were tears in her eyes. "Daniel, I have spent my entire life preparing humanity for the possibility of alien contact. I always believed we would be ready." She paused and took a shaky breath. "We are not ready. Not even close. If we fight, we die. If we surrender, we die. There is no scenario where humanity survives this." The next 20 hours were the darkest in human history. World leaders gathered in Geneva to discuss their options. Military commanders admitted that Earth had no defense against such an overwhelming force. Religious leaders prayed for miracles. Parents held their children and wondered if they would live to see another sunrise. Daniel returned to Gateway Prime feeling completely hopeless. He had dedicated his life to protecting Earth, and now he realized that everything he had built was meaningless. The Zorathi could wipe out humanity as easily as a human might step on an ant. He was sitting alone in his quarters when his personal communicator buzzed with an encrypted message. The sender was listed as unknown. The message contained only a set of coordinates and 3 words. Come alone. Now. Daniel knew he should ignore it. He knew it could be a trap, but something in his gut told him to go. Perhaps it was desperation. Perhaps it was the faint hope that someone out there had answers. He took a small shuttle and flew to the coordinates without telling anyone. The location was deep in the Nevada desert, far from any city or settlement. When Daniel landed, he saw nothing but sand and rocks stretching to the horizon. Then a section of the ground began to move, revealing a hidden entrance that led deep underground. Daniel walked through metal corridors that looked older than anything he had ever seen. Lights flickered on as he passed. The air smelled stale and ancient. Finally, he reached a large circular room filled with strange equipment and screens showing alien symbols he did not recognize. A woman stepped out of the shadows. Daniel felt his heart stop. He knew that face. He had attended her funeral 15 years ago. "Hello, Daniel," said Dr. Sophie Turner. She looked exactly as he remembered her, though she should have been much older by now. "I know you have questions. I know you are confused and afraid, but I need you to listen carefully because everything depends on what I am about to tell you." Daniel could barely speak. "Sophie, how is this possible? You died. I saw them put you in the ground." Sophie smiled sadly. "I did not die, Daniel. I went into hiding because I had work to do. Work that has taken generations to complete. Work that was started long before either of us were born." She gestured to the equipment around them. "This facility has existed since 1947. It was built to prepare humanity for the exact situation we now face." She pressed a button on the console beside her. The screens around the room came alive with images of stars and planets and alien civilizations that had been destroyed. Daniel watched in horror as world after world fell to the Zorathi dominion. "The Zorathi have conquered 12 star systems," Sophie said quietly. "They have wiped out countless species, and every single time their victims had no warning, no chance to prepare, no hope." She turned to face Daniel with fierce determination in her eyes. "But humanity is different. We were given a gift, a chance, and tonight we are going to use it." Daniel stared at her. "What gift? What are you talking about?" Sophie took his hand and led him toward a door at the far end of the room. "Come with me, Admiral. It is time you learned the truth about Project Lighthouse." Sophie led Daniel through a maze of underground corridors. The deeper they went, the stranger everything became. The walls were covered with symbols and writing that looked nothing like any human language. Strange machines hummed with energy that made the hair on Daniel's arms stand up. He felt like he was walking through a dream. "In 1947, something crashed in this desert," Sophie began. "The government told everyone it was a weather balloon. That was a lie. It was a spacecraft, but it did not belong to the Zorathi. It belonged to a species called the Ethon." She stopped in front of a large window that looked into a room below. Daniel pressed his face against the glass and saw the remains of an alien vessel. It was small, barely larger than a car, and its metal skin was twisted and burned from the crash. But even in its damaged state, Daniel could tell it was far more advanced than anything humans had ever created. "The Ethan were a peaceful species," Sophie continued. "They had no weapons, no armies. They believed that all intelligent life could live together in harmony. And because of that belief, they were completely unprepared when the Zorathi came." Her voice grew heavy with sadness. "The Zorathi destroyed their entire civilization in less than a year. Billions of Ethon died. Their cities were turned to dust. Their history was erased." Daniel turned to look at her. "If they were all killed, how did this ship get here?" "Because one group of Ethon refused to give up hope," Sophie said. "Even as their world burned around them, they built this ship and filled it with everything they had. All their knowledge, all their technology. everything they had learned from studying the Zorathi and the other species the Zorathi had conquered. She pressed her hand against the glass. They sent it across the galaxy toward a planet they had discovered through their telescopes, a planet with primitive creatures who showed unusual potential, a planet called Earth. Sophie led Daniel to another room. This one was filled with screens and storage devices that contained more information than he could imagine. Scientists in white coats moved between the machines, monitoring data and taking notes. The Ethan pilot survived the crash for 3 days, Sophie explained. Long enough to explain what was coming and why they had chosen Earth. They said humanity was special, different from other species they had observed. They called it the Fire. The Fire? Daniel asked. Sophie nodded. The Ethon noticed something about humans that other species lacked. We adapt, we improvise, we refuse to accept impossible situations. When other species faced certain death, they surrendered or ran, but humans fought. Humans found solutions that should not have existed. The Ethon believed that if any species could defeat the Zorathi, it would be us. She brought up images on the screens around them. Daniel saw diagrams of ships and weapons and technologies that seemed like magic. The Ethon gave us everything they had collected, Sophie said. The combined knowledge of 30 civilizations that the Zorathi had destroyed, shield technology from the Varanthi, propulsion systems from the Kelmari, weapons designed by the Torathi, and something else, something the Ethon themselves created but were too afraid to use. What was it? Daniel asked. A frequency, Sophie replied. The Zorathi technology is all connected through quantum bonds. It is what makes them so powerful, but the Ethon discovered that a specific harmonic frequency can disrupt those bonds completely. One moment the Zorathi ships are invincible. The next moment they are just dead metal floating in space. Daniel felt a spark of hope ignite in his chest. If we have this frequency, why are we not using it? Why are we letting the world believe we are helpless? Sophie's expression grew serious. Because using it is not simple. The frequency must be transmitted from inside the enemy fleet, close to their command ship. Anyone who carries the device will almost certainly die, and even getting that close requires ships that can match the Zorathi in battle. She led Daniel through one final door. What he saw on the other side made him forget how to breathe. They were standing on a platform overlooking an enormous underground hangar. Below them sat 6 massive warships unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. Their hulls were black and sleek, covered with patterns that seemed to shift and move. They were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "We call this Project Lighthouse," Sophie said. "For nearly 200 years, a secret organization has been studying the Ethon archives and building these ships. We have trained crews in hidden facilities. We have developed weapons and shields that rival anything the Zorathi possess. We have been waiting for this exact moment." Daniel gripped the railing in front of him. 200 years? How is that possible? How could something this big stay secret for so long? Because everyone involved understood what was at stake, Sophie answered. Lighthouse members gave up their public lives. They faked their deaths. They watched their families grow old and die without ever being able to contact them. They made sacrifices that most people could never imagine. She paused. I made those sacrifices. I left behind everyone I loved because I knew this day would come. Daniel thought about all the years he had known Sophie. She had been his teacher and his friend. He had wept at her funeral, and all that time she had been down here, working in the shadows to save a world that did not know she existed. 6 ships against thousands, Daniel said quietly. Those are not good odds. Sophie smiled. We have more than 6 ships. These are just the ones being prepared here. There are 6 more hidden on the dark side of the moon, 12 warships in total, crewed by people who have trained their entire lives for this battle. She handed Daniel a data chip. I am showing you this because we need you, Daniel. We need the Earth Defense Force to coordinate with us. We need to launch a 2-front attack. Your ships will distract the Zorathi while our fleet strikes at their heart. A small team will deliver the frequency device to the enemy command ship. The survival odds for that team? Daniel asked. Less than 4%? Sophie admitted. Daniel looked down at the ships below. He thought about the billions of people on Earth who were counting on him. He thought about the Ethon, a peaceful species who had sacrificed everything to give humanity a chance. "Tell me what you need me to do," he said. Sophie put her hand on his shoulder. "First, there is someone you need to meet. The man who will lead our fleet into battle." She led Daniel back through the corridors and up to the surface. A shuttle was waiting for them, its engines already warming up. "Where are we going?" Daniel asked as they climbed aboard. "The moon," Sophie replied. "It is time you saw the full extent of what humanity has built in secret, and it is time you met Captain Marcus Cole." The shuttle lifted off and rose through the atmosphere. Daniel watched Earth shrink below them and wondered if this would be the last time he saw his home. But somewhere deep inside, a feeling was growing that he had not experienced in a long time. Hope. The shuttle approached the moon's south pole, where sunlight never reached and permanent shadows covered the landscape. Daniel had traveled through space many times, but he had never been to this region. There was nothing here, no bases, no mining operations, no reason for anyone to visit. At least, that was what he had always believed. Sophie entered a code into the shuttle's controls. Ahead of them, a section of the crater floor began to move. Massive doors slid apart, revealing an entrance that led deep beneath the lunar surface. The shuttle descended into darkness, and then lights flickered on around them. Daniel could not believe what he was seeing. The underground hangar was enormous, stretching for kilometers in every direction. 12 warships hung suspended in launch positions, their black hulls gleaming under the artificial lights. Hundreds of smaller support vessels surrounded them. Thousands of crew members moved across walkways and platforms, preparing for battle. "This is impossible," Daniel whispered. "How did you build all this without anyone knowing?" "Very carefully," Sophie replied with a small smile. "We used resources from asteroid mining operations that were officially listed as failures. We brought materials up in small quantities over decades. Every bolt, every circuit, every piece of glass was transported in secret." She guided the shuttle toward a landing platform near the largest ship. "It took 7 generations of Lighthouse members to build this fleet. 7 generations of people who dedicated their lives to a battle they knew they might never live to see." The shuttle landed smoothly. As Daniel stepped out, he felt the artificial gravity pulling at his body. The air was clean and fresh, recycled through systems far more efficient than anything on Earth. Everything about this place was more advanced than the public technology he had used his entire career. A man was waiting for them on the platform. He was younger than Daniel expected, perhaps in his early 40s, with short dark hair and calm gray eyes. He wore a uniform that Daniel did not recognize, black with silver trim and strange symbols on the shoulders. "Admiral Brooks," the man said, extending his hand. "I am Captain Marcus Cole, commander of the Defiance and the Lighthouse Fleet. It is an honor to finally meet you." Daniel shook his hand. "Captain Cole, I have to admit, until an hour ago, I did not know you existed." "That was the point," Marcus replied. "The best way to keep a secret is to make sure no one knows there is a secret to find." He gestured toward the massive ship behind him. "Come. Let me show you what we have built." They walked through the corridors of the Defiance. Daniel noticed that everything was different from Earth ships. The walls seemed to absorb sound. The lights adjusted automatically based on where people were standing. Doors opened before anyone touched them, as if the ship itself knew what its crew needed. "The hull is made from a material we call adaptive metal," Marcus explained as they walked. "It learns from every impact it receives. The more you hit it, the stronger it becomes. Our shields operate on principles that human science does not fully understand yet. We copied them from the Varanthi archives. They entered the bridge, a circular room filled with holographic displays and control stations. 20 officers sat at their posts, monitoring systems and running simulations. They all turned and nodded respectfully when Marcus entered. "Every member of this crew was born into the Lighthouse program," Marcus said. "Their parents were Lighthouse members. Their grandparents were Lighthouse members. They have been training for this mission since they could walk." He pointed to a young woman at the weapons station. "Lieutenant Clara Young can hit a target the size of a coin from 10,000 kilometers away. She has been practicing that shot since she was 6 years old." Daniel looked around at the crew. They were so young, most of them younger than his own children, but their eyes held a focus and determination that he had rarely seen in soldiers twice their age. "Why?" Daniel asked quietly. "Why would anyone choose this life? Training in secret, never being able to tell the world what they are doing, never getting any recognition for their sacrifices." Marcus was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "Because the Ethon believed in us. They gave their lives to reach Earth. They trusted humanity with the only hope of stopping the Zorathi. How could we dishonor that sacrifice by doing anything less than our best?" He turned to face Daniel directly. "Every generation asks itself whether it will be the one to face the enemy. My generation received that call. I intend to answer it." Sophie stepped forward. "Show him the plan, Marcus." Marcus nodded and activated the main display. A holographic map of the solar system appeared, showing the positions of the Zorathi fleet and Earth's defenses. "The Zorathi will expect humanity to fight with everything we have," Marcus began. "They will expect desperate attacks from inferior ships. They will not expect this." He pointed to the lighthouse fleet positions. "We will emerge from the moon's shadow in 2 waves. The first wave will engage the Zorathi forward elements, drawing their attention and making them believe we are attempting to break through their lines." He moved his hand across the display. "While they are focused on the first wave, a small shuttle carrying Sophie and a strike team will slip through the chaos. Their target is the Zorathi command ship, specifically the central power core. That is where Sophie will activate the frequency device." Daniel studied the map. "Even with your advanced ships, you will be outnumbered hundreds to 1. How long can you hold them?" "Our simulations suggest we can survive approximately 6 hours of sustained combat," Marcus admitted. "That should be enough time for the strike team to reach the command ship and complete their mission." "And if the strike team fails?" Marcus did not answer. He did not need to. They both knew what failure would mean. "I want to lead the strike team," said a voice from behind them. Daniel turned to see Lieutenant Amy Reeves standing in the doorway. She had followed them from Earth without permission, taking another shuttle from Gateway Prime. "Lieutenant, you do not have authorization to be here," Daniel said. "With respect, sir, I do not care," Amy replied. She walked forward until she was standing in front of Sophie. "I heard everything you told the Admiral. I know what is at stake. And I know that I am the best pilot in the entire Earth Defense Force." She stood at attention. "Let me help. Let me be part of this." Sophie studied the young woman for a long moment. Then she smiled. "The Ethon said humanity was special because we refused to accept defeat. I think you just proved them right, Lieutenant." She looked at Marcus. "She joins the strike team." Marcus nodded. "Then we launch in 8 hours. Everyone to their stations. Today, we fight for every species the Zorathi have destroyed. Today, we fight for every generation that built this fleet. Today, we fight for the future of humanity." The crew responded with a single word, spoken together like a promise. Defiance. The Zorathi fleet hung in space like a cloud of metal and death. 3,000 ships surrounded Earth, each one bristling with weapons that could level entire cities in seconds. Their commander, a creature called the Paramount, sat in his throne room aboard the largest vessel and watched the primitive human ships scramble into defensive positions. He felt nothing but contempt. The Paramount had conquered 11 worlds and had never lost a single battle. He had watched species beg for mercy. He had watched civilizations crumble to dust. The humans were no different from any other prey he had hunted. They would struggle for a while, and then they would die. "Send a message to the surface," the Paramount ordered. "Tell them their time is up. Begin the cleansing." The Zorathi fleet started moving toward Earth. The first wave of their ships accelerated ahead of the main force, ready to destroy the pitiful human defenses. On Gateway Prime, Admiral Daniel Brooks watched them coming and felt his heart pound against his ribs. "All stations report ready," an officer announced. "Earth Defense Force is in position." Daniel nodded. The plan was simple. His fleet would engage the Zorathi and try to hold their attention for as long as possible. They would die, of course. Everyone knew that. But every minute they survived would give the Lighthouse fleet more time to strike. "Send the signal," Daniel ordered. A coded transmission shot toward the moon. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the darkness on the lunar surface erupted with light as 12 ships rose from their hidden positions and accelerated toward the battlefield. The Zorathi sensors screamed with warnings, unknown energy signatures, unidentified vessel configurations. Technologies that should not have existed on this primitive planet. "What is this?" the Paramount demanded. His officers were shouting and pointing at their screens. The readings made no sense. The unknown ships were using shield frequencies that belonged to the Varanthi, a species the Zorathi had exterminated 3 centuries ago. Their weapons matched designs from the Tarathi archives. Their propulsion systems were Kelmari. The Defiance led the charge, its black hull cutting through space like a blade. Captain Marcus Cole stood on his bridge with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the enemy fleet grow larger on the display. "All ships, engage at will," he commanded. "Make them remember this day." The first exchange of fire lit up the darkness. Zorathi weapons slammed into the lighthouse shields, expecting instant penetration. Instead, the energy dissipated harmlessly across the adaptive metal hulls. The Zorathi commanders blinked in confusion. That was not supposed to happen. Then the lighthouse ships returned fire. Beams of concentrated energy tore through Zorathi vessels like paper. Explosions bloomed across the enemy formation. In the first 30 seconds of combat, humanity destroyed more Zorathi ships than any other species had managed in their entire history. On the Defiance Bridge, Lieutenant Clara Young worked her weapons station with calm precision. Her hands moved across the controls as if she were playing a musical instrument. Every shot found its target. Every beam hit exactly where she intended. "3 kills confirmed," she reported. "Acquiring new targets." Marcus watched his fleet fight with pride swelling in his chest. This was what 7 generations had built. This was what the Ethon had believed humanity could achieve. "Maintain formation," he ordered. "Draw them in. Give the strike team room to move." The strike shuttle was small and fast, designed to be invisible in the chaos of battle. Amy Reeves sat at the controls, weaving through explosions and debris with skills she had spent her entire life developing. Sophie Turner sat behind her, holding the frequency device in her lap like a precious child. 4 soldiers accompanied them. Their names were Jack Palmer, Nina Vasquez, Eric Chen, and Maria Santos. They were the best of the best, chosen from thousands of lighthouse operatives. They knew they probably would not survive. They came anyway. "I see the command ship," Amy announced. "It is big, really big." Sophie leaned forward to look through the viewport. The Paramount's flagship was massive, larger than some moons, covered with weapons and surrounded by a defensive screen of smaller vessels. "Can you get us inside?" Sophie asked. Amy grinned. "Watch me." She pushed the shuttle into a dive, slipping between two Zorathi cruisers, so close that their hulls almost scraped against each other. The enemy ships fired at her, but she was already gone, spinning and rolling through the chaos like a leaf in a hurricane. Back on the Defiance, Marcus watched 3 of his ships take critical damage. The Resilience was venting atmosphere. The Valiant had lost its main engines. The Courage was burning from bow to stern. "All ships fall back to secondary positions," he commanded. "We need to hold them for 4 more hours." The Paramount watched the battle with growing fury. His fleet was supposed to be invincible. His ships were supposed to be unstoppable. And yet these humans, these primitive creatures who had barely learned to travel between planets, were destroying his warriors by the hundreds. "Focus all fire on the largest enemy vessel," he ordered. "Destroy their leader." Thousands of Zorathi weapons turned toward the Defiance. Marcus felt his ship shudder as the shields absorbed impact after impact. Warning lights flashed across every console. "Shields at 40%, an officer reported. "Hull breaches on deck 7 through 12. "Seal those sections," Marcus ordered. "Reroute power from non-essential systems to the shields." On Gateway Prime, Daniel watched the battle through tears. The lighthouse ships were taking terrible punishment. 2 of them were already dead, their wreckage floating among the Zorathi debris, but they had destroyed over 500 enemy vessels, 500 ships that would never threaten Earth. "Sir, the strike shuttle has reached the command ship," an officer reported. "They are attempting to breach the hull." Daniel gripped his console. Everything depended on what happened next. Amy found a maintenance hatch on the underside of the Paramount's flagship. Eric and Maria worked on the lock, while Jack and Nina provided cover fire against the internal defense drones that swarmed toward them. "We are in," Eric announced. They moved through the corridors of the alien ship, following the schematics that the Ethon had provided nearly 2 centuries ago. The Zorathi had not changed their designs. Why would they? No one had ever been able to get this close before. Sophie clutched the frequency device against her chest. It was small enough to fit in one hand, but it contained the last hope of 30 conquered civilizations. The Ethon had designed it. The Varanthi had refined it. The Tarathi had tested it. And now, a human would finally use it. "The power core is ahead," Amy reported. 200 meters. Then the Zorathi warriors found them. The corridor erupted with weapons fire. Jack took a hit to his shoulder but kept shooting. Maria went down with a wound to her leg. Nina dragged her behind cover while Eric provided suppressing fire. "Go!" Jack shouted at Amy and Sophie. "We will hold them! Complete the mission!" Amy grabbed Sophie's arm and ran. Behind them, she heard her teammates fighting and dying to buy them precious seconds. The frequency device felt heavier than it should have in Sophie's hands. They reached the power core. It was beautiful in a terrible way, a swirling ball of energy that powered the entire Zorathi fleet. Sophie knelt beside it and began connecting the frequency device. "How long?" Amy asked, firing at the Zorathi who were trying to push through the door. 60 seconds, Sophie replied. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was calm. "Once I activate it, the pulse will need 30 seconds to build. During that time, I cannot leave. The device requires direct contact with the power core." Amy understood what Sophie was saying. The frequency would kill her. There was no escape. "I will stay with you," Amy said. Sophie shook her head. "No, you will survive. You will tell the world what we did here." She smiled, and for a moment she looked like the young teacher Daniel had known decades ago. "The Ethon believed in us, Amy. Prove them right." She activated the device. The frequency device began to glow with a soft blue light. Sophie kept her hands pressed against it, feeling the energy build beneath her palms. Around her, the Zorathi power core started to flicker and pulse in strange patterns. The aliens knew something was wrong. They just did not know what. Amy fired shot after shot at the Zorathi warriors trying to break through the door. Her arms were burning with exhaustion. A beam grazed her side, opening a wound that bled freely down her uniform. But she did not stop. She could not stop. 20 seconds, Sophie said calmly. Her eyes were closed now. Light was spreading from the device, crawling up her arms like glowing vines. Amy, you need to go. The shuttle is still outside. You can make it. I am not leaving you, Amy replied. Sophie opened her eyes. They were filled with the same blue light as the device. You are not leaving me. You are carrying me forward. Every person who survives will know what happened here. Our story will inspire generations, but only if someone lives to tell it. She smiled through the pain. Go, Amy. That is an order. Amy hesitated for one more second. Then she turned and ran. The Zorathi warriors pushed through the door just as Amy disappeared down a side corridor. They saw Sophie kneeling beside their power core, surrounded by light that hurt their eyes. They raised their weapons to kill her. They were too late. The frequency pulse exploded outward from the device. It passed through the walls of the command ship like they were not even there. It spread across the battlefield at the speed of light, washing over every Zorathi vessel in the fleet. On the bridge of the Defiance, Captain Marcus Cole saw every Zorathi ship go dark simultaneously. Their weapons stopped firing. Their engines went silent. Their shields collapsed. 3,000 vessels became nothing more than dead metal drifting in space. All ships, open fire, Marcus commanded. Do not let a single one escape. The lighthouse fleet, battered and bleeding but still alive, turned their weapons on the helpless enemy. Explosions lit up the darkness like a chain of stars. Zorathi ships that had seemed invincible moments before shattered into fragments of twisted metal. The Paramount felt his throne room shake as the humans tore his fleet apart. His screens were dead. His weapons were useless. His communications were silent. For the first time in his long existence, he experienced something he had never felt before. Fear. The last thing he saw was the bow of the Defiance coming toward him, its weapons glowing with human fury. Amy reached the maintenance hatch and threw herself into the shuttle. Her hands moved across the controls automatically, starting the engines and pulling away from the command ship, just as it began to break apart. She did not look back. She could not look back. She flew through the debris field, weaving between the wreckage of Zorathi and human ships alike. The battle was over. Humanity had won. But the cost had been terrible. Of the 12 lighthouse ships, only 5 remained functional. 3 more were too damaged to ever fly again. 4 were completely destroyed. Thousands of crew members had given their lives, but Earth was safe. The people below would live to see another sunrise. Daniel watched from Gateway Prime as the surviving ships gathered together. He saw the shuttle approaching and knew who was inside. When Amy stumbled through the airlock, covered in blood and barely able to stand, he caught her in his arms. "Sophie," Amy whispered. "She saved us all." Daniel held her tighter and let himself cry. For Sophie, for the crew members who had died, for the generations of lighthouse members who had sacrificed everything for this moment. 3 days later, the world learned the truth. Every screen on Earth showed the same broadcast as the story of Project Lighthouse was finally revealed. People watched in amazement as they learned about the Ethon, the hidden fleet, and the centuries of secret preparation that had saved their species. Reactions were mixed at first. Some people felt angry that such a massive secret had been kept from them. They protested in the streets, demanding to know what else the government was hiding. Others felt only gratitude for the people who had given everything to protect a world that never knew they existed. A memorial was built in Geneva, listing the names of every lighthouse member who had died in the battle. Sophie Turner's name was at the top. Below it was a simple inscription: "She carried the fire." Amy visited the memorial every day during her recovery. Her wounds healed slowly, leaving scars that would never fully fade. but the scars inside were deeper. She dreamed about Sophie every night, hearing her calm voice counting down the seconds. She woke up crying more often than she wanted to admit. Marcus Cole, now promoted to admiral, found her sitting at the memorial one evening as the sun was setting. "I keep thinking I should have done more," Amy said without looking up. "I should have stayed with her. I should have found another way." Marcus sat down beside her. There was no other way. Sophie knew that. She chose to save you because she believed your life was worth saving. He paused. She was right. They sat in silence for a while, watching the names on the wall as the light faded. "What happens now?" Amy asked. Marcus stood up and offered her his hand. "Now we finish what the Ethon started. The Zorathi Dominion controls 11 other star systems. Billions of intelligent beings are living under their rule, waiting for someone to free them." He pulled her to her feet. "The question is whether humanity will answer that call." Amy looked at the memorial one last time. She thought about Sophie and the strike team. She thought about the lighthouse members who had dedicated their lives to a secret war. She thought about the Ethon, who had crossed the galaxy to give humanity a chance. "The Ethon believed in us," Amy said quietly. "They saw something in humans that made them think we could make a difference." She turned to face Marcus with determination in her eyes. "I want to prove them right." 6 months later, the first human expedition fleet launched from the rebuilt lunar shipyards. 20 warships, crewed by volunteers from every nation on Earth, set course for the nearest Zorathi-controlled system. At the head of the fleet flew the newly constructed Defiance, commanded by Admiral Marcus Cole. Amy Reeves stood on the bridge, her scars visible above the collar of her uniform. She had been promoted to captain and given command of the Courage, the same name as one of the ships that had been destroyed in the battle for Earth. Daniel Brooks watched the fleet depart from Gateway Prime. He was too old to go with them, but he had trained the next generation to carry on the mission. In his pocket, he carried a small device that Sophie had given him before the battle. It contained a message from the original Ethon pilot, recorded nearly 2 centuries ago. He played it one more time as the ships disappeared into the darkness. "To the beings of Earth," the alien voice said, "we do not know if you will receive this message. We do not know if you will understand it. But we have seen your kind through our telescopes, and we believe you carry a fire that burns brighter than any we have ever witnessed. Please prove us right. Please carry that fire to the stars. And please, whatever you do, never let it die." Daniel smiled through his tears. The fire was spreading.